What's up guys, HCG here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're updating Pendulum Magicians, and it looks like that in every single ban list, Konami is trying to give us back more Pendulum support, just for the fact to compensate that we're not getting back Electromite ever. I know it's sad, but still, we do get cards back, so this time we got 3 Jokers, which most of us are coming, because Joker went to 2 to the previous list, so it was obviously guaranteed it was going to 3 this list, but we did get something that we were not expecting. We got back 1 copy of Astrograph, which I think gives a lot of more utility and opportunities for a deck like this, and for me Pendulum Magician is the most fun Pendulum deck to use, and I know that a lot of people would agree with this, which is why I decided to make more of a Magician type deck rather than playing Endymion or any other type of generic deck with like Mythical Beasts and stuff. I just enjoy pure Pendulum Magicians with Performapals a lot more than any other Pendulum deck, which is what I'm profiling today. So if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off with the monsters, we have 3 copies of Double Iris Magician, pretty standard. When you pop this card, you get to search your pendulum graphs. Your time pendulum graph is still one of your main pieces of interruption when you're playing this deck. This is a high scale. You need to make a balance of your high and low scales just to be able to go for pendulum summons consistently. And this deck kinda got a little bit nerfed in the ban list too, with Desires going to 1, because it's a card that a lot of players were just maxing out, because pendulum decks just need a lot more cards in the deck in their hand in order to be able to go for bigger plays, which is a little bit sad because a card like this was very useful. But still, you win some, you lose some. We got cards back. We're not going to complain. So yeah, 3 Double Iris, absolutely important. We have 3 copies of Purple Poison. Now, there will be a lot of 3-offs in the deck that you might think that you can kind of cut to lower numbers. But the thing is that every single card has their utility, and I'm going to explain why every single 3-off is absolutely 3-off in my opinion. So, Purple Poison, first of all, I think I would max out just because of the fact that we're going to have a lot more floodgate type decks in the format. With 3 Skill Drain, you're going to see Eldritch a lot more than before, and because of that, people are going to play other cards. They're not playing just 3 Skill Drain, they play cards like Gozen Match. And Purple Poison is the card that deals with all those pesky floodgates in order for you to be able to play. So I think it's important to max it out because you want to see it in order to be able to destroy those cards. So yeah, this card, I think it's important at 3. Another controversial opinion is that you need to play 3 copies of Black Fang. Now, it follows similar logic to Purple Poison, which is why I think this card makes you play around stuff more easily. So decks like Eldritch, they're playing Solemns as well. Mainly Strike in the main deck, but some people may play Judgment. So this card helps you play around those Solemns when you're Pendulum summoning. If you know what you're doing and you're maxing out of Black Fang, Solemns don't really do much against Pendulum Magicians. It has always been the deck that can play around a Solemn on the Pendulum summon the best out of any other deck. So I think Black Fang just being able to revive monsters makes it very easy. And also the Pendulum effect is nothing to laugh at, because just being able to cut your opponent's monsters attack in half and Double Iris making you do double damage on them, with cards like the Dark Rebellion, Supreme King, you can just absolutely destroy your opponents with 1 hit. So I think all of these cards have utilities that, just in the worst case scenario, if you don't really want to use their effect, they're scales, which is something that Pendulum decks have always had going for them. Even if your effects are not the most optimal against certain matchups, just being possible scales makes them useful in one way. So I think 3 copies of this card, even though a lot of people would play even 1 in other builds, I still think that it makes a lot of plays more possible, just because you're going to face a lot more control decks this format, just because of the way the ban list unfolded. We have 3 copies of Harmonizing. This is pretty standard. This card, you just want to Pendulum summon, get your Magicians out of your deck, really good. 3 copies of Wisdom Eye, another mandatory 3-off, getting you to any Magician you need and getting you to any scale you need, which is more important. 2 copies of Off Dragon. I really love this card because the problems I have with some Pendulum decks is that they don't have a follow-up. So the problem is that you just bring your entire hand on the field, and if your opponent breaks it, you're basically screwed. So there are certain cards in this particular deck that just give you follow-up, which is something that I always want to have in pretty much any deck I play, just because I know that we're going to get into a lot of grind games. So cards like this that help you get more cards back is actually very useful. And even if it's not meant to go for grind game, this card can just give you back a Wisdom Eye that you used, which you can make sure to summon more monsters of your hand, because you can only summon 1 from your extra deck if you don't go for a link first, which is why a card like this is very, very useful. And also, it being level 6 means that you can summon your Baron very quickly, just because of your Harmonizing, getting this, and 4 plus 6 equals 10. So you have even more reason to play multiple copies of this card, because sometimes you get 1 into the scale and you want to summon the other one out of your deck. Now we have 1 copy of Astrograph. This card being at 1 means a lot of things. First of all, it's not going to be as broken as it was for 2 reasons. First of all is because Electromite is just not in the game anymore, so you cannot facilitate in the extra deck whenever you want, and you cannot also pop your monsters whenever you want. And the thing is that when you have 3 copies, you can basically use 2 of them for Absolute, but now to do that you need other cards, and I am playing a couple cards in order to be able to do that, because before, Absolute and Vortex were not really worth playing, but now with Astrograph they're actually worth putting back into the extra deck because of 2 other cards I have in the deck. But yeah, Astrograph is a free body on the field, it gives you another search, it just facilitates all of this grinding I mentioned, because it gets you more cards out of your deck that you do not have to absolutely necessarily use on the turn you get them, but you can keep them for the following turn if you don't have to. We have one copy of Zangia Magician. This is one of the level 7s I mentioned, because you summon this along with your Astrograph, you go into Absolute, you link away, you go into Vortex, you get another negate. Pretty standard. Same thing with the one copy of Dragon Pit, but the reason I play both is because a lot of the times you're going to be forced to put Dragon Pit in the skill to deal with floodgates. I mentioned again, cards like Ghost and Match and Skill Drain in Eldritch decks are going to be very, very popular, so you need to be able to deal with them before you commit to a Pendulum summon, otherwise you're not going to get your important effects. So this card is a decent one-off, you can get access to it whenever you want, it's a really good card. We have one copy of Tuning Magician. This is a card that I've been enjoying a lot lately in the decks like this, because it gives you access to cards that you normally wouldn't have really easy access to. Just because of cards like Astrograph being level 7 and this being level 1, you can summon level 8 Synchros as well, and it's a free monster. You can send this to the graveyard with Time Star when you're trying to protect something, and you can just get it back from the graveyard right away. It's a really good card and it's really free, and with Needle Fiber it's even more free than before. You can get it out of the deck, link away for a Selene, get it back, link away for an Access Cord and Rapaloosa, and you still haven't used its effect in the graveyard, so you get another monster. It's a really good card and I would highly recommend playing it. Now for the Performapal monsters, we have 3 copies of Joker. You also have a consistent normal summon now, because when it was at 2 it was okay, but most of the time you were just using Sorcerer first and then searching this and then normal summoning it after you Pendulum summon. But the thing is that now that you can normal summon this before your Pendulum summon, you can search the second copy for the follow-up, which is another thing I mentioned. You need follow-up in Pendulum decks. So 3 Jokers along with 3 copies of Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer guarantees that not only you will have the search power you need, but also Sorcerer is so important, popping cards like your Double Iris, popping cards like your Purple Poison. It just gives so much utility to a deck like this that I would not play any less than 3 copies. It's absolutely important. We also play 3 copies of Performapal Celestial Magician. This is another card you can search with your Pendulum Sorcerer, because if you only have one target to search, then and you want to pop both, then you don't have anything else to search. But the thing is, this card just gives you a lot of cards in order to be able to search, and not only that, if you Pendulum summon this, you can get another search of a Pendulum monster during the end phase, and if you don't really want to do that, it's just a high skill you can put. So if you pop your Double Iris and you need another high skill for the next turn, then you have this. So it's a really good card. I think that playing 3 copies of all these Performapal monsters just makes the deck more resilient, it makes the deck have more options, and just to be able to have the follow-up for every single turn. And we also have 1 copy of Artifact Scythe, because for some reason this card did not get hit. So yeah, we're going to use it for as long as we can. It's a card that you can use very easily. I'm not playing Enforcer. I don't think it's worth playing, to be honest, in this deck. You don't really need it. With Pendulum Graph, it's very easy to pop, so you don't really care, because you just need to be able to pop your own cards with your own cards. So Enforcer, yeah, does that, but if you have other ways to do it in your deck, you don't really need to. So if you want to play Enforcer, go for it, but I feel like with 2 Destiny Fusion, you're just going to see it less often, and you're going to see the bricks just as often, because you have 2 good cards and 2 bricks right now. Yes, Anaconda is still a thing, but I'd rather go for Electromite or Dagda than going for Anaconda in a deck like this. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Duelist Alliance, pretty standard. You need to be able to get to your searches. It searches your Double Iris, it searches your Sorcerer, and it searches your 1 copy of Pendulum Call. Now, this card is at 1 just because it's not the greatest card. It's just here just in case your hand is bad enough to the point of needing it to get 2 specific searches, because you won't have scales otherwise. But the effect that prevents you from popping your monsters and using your Magician's effects is just so bad that it's just not worth playing. I've considered multiple times cutting this card, but every time I cut it, there have been scenarios where I needed it, so I'm just playing 1 just in case, because I can search it with Duelist Alliance. It's always gonna be at 1. I would never play more than 1. It's not the greatest card. It's just here just for insurance. Another card that I think is worth playing at more than 1, and some people even play 0 of this card, is 2 copies of Star Pendulum Graph. I love this card. This card is absolutely insane. So this card is another way to play around cards that pop your scales. So if your opponent like uses Conquistadors to pop your scales, or people will start playing Cosmic Cyclones even in the main deck, because Eldritch is going to become way more popular than before, this card helps you play around all that. Back row removal doesn't do much against your deck if you have this card, because if they just Cosmic Cyclone one of your scales, you just go get another one. So this card is really good. I just love this card so much. Every time I played at 1, it overperforms, and I always wanted to put a second one, so I just made it a tradition in my Pendulum Magician profiles to always play at least 2. I would not play 3, that would be overkill, but 2 I think is absolutely ridiculous. And if you have your Time Pendulum Graph, you can always search this card, so you can make it even more consistent with Double Iris. I love this card so much. I would never play less than 2. We have 1 copy of Pot of Desires. This is sad because a lot of Pendulum decks were using this card, but I can see why it happened, mainly because of Sword Soul, and because Tri-Brigade Pure was playing that before. I know that best decks of the format usually play Desires, because the best decks are the decks that have all their cards at 3, so this is why this card was so good, and I can see why it became limited, and also because it was super budget, and they want to promote cards like Prosperity, and for people to have more incentive to pick up Prosperity abilities instead of desires. So I can see why they did that, but again, it's a thing that kind of was a nerf to Pendulum decks along with a lot of other decks, but as long as we got other cards back, it's fine. And we have 2 copies of Time Pendulum Graph. This card is absolutely ridiculous. This card is the best disruption you can ask for in any type of in-archetype deck. It just makes that your Time Star Magician is 10 times more useful because you can send another card to the grave. If you pop your purple poison, you can pop another card. If you pop your black fang, you can revive. If you pop your double iris, you get another search. Really amazing card. For the extra deck, for the Xyz monsters, we have 1 copy of Type Star Magician. This card is amazing. This card is the only way you can get consistent access to your Astrograph. And not only that, being able to protect your monsters, your scales, from destroying your Time Pendulum Graph, and then sending your Tuning Magician to the graveyard as well so you can get it back next turn is really, really good. And you can even do it during your own turn with cards like Tornado Dragon or Pendulum Sorcerer. You can do a lot of cards with this card. We also play 1 Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion. This is the OTK machine of this deck. With combinations with Black Fang and Double Iris and this card, you just make your opponent completely lose because it just one-shots your opponent. This card is so good. We play 1 copy of Tornado Dragon just because sometimes you don't have access to your Sorcerer or you don't have access to your Joker, so you need to be able to pop your Double Iris as consistently as possible, and having a rank 4 that can do it, it doesn't get any more consistent than that, so you need to be able to play this card just for the utility it provides. And against certain decks, especially if we play against a lot of more control decks in the following format, it's going to get a lot more value. We play 1 copy of Absolute with 1 copy of Vortex. Now these cards, they are good again. Before, I don't think they were good because you would have to play cards like Dark Worm with your Gate 0, which was not the best card because it's a card that you hardly ever want to scale, but it's not a good monster to summon anyway. So with Astrograph, these 2 cards are really good again, giving you another bounce, giving you another negate. They're really good cards, and sometimes even keeping Absolute on the field can be clutch, being able to stop attacks. Yes, this scenario has come up, so I'm mentioning it just for that. For the Xyz monsters, we have 1 copy of Omega. You can play other cards instead of Omega, but the thing is that you don't get to a Link monster in the graveyard as consistently as I would like to play Savage. It would only do that if you go for Fiber, but if you go for Fiber, that means that you're using your Harmonizing for Fiber and not your Baroness. So I would highly recommend playing Omega instead and trying to focus on summoning Baroness with your Harmonizing than Needle Fiber, because when you're trying to summon your Savage, then you're tunnel visioning into sending a Link monster in the graveyard that makes your other plays a little bit more weird. So this card, I think, just makes more sense, and you can basically snipe another card, so you have 1 card less to deal with. We have 1 copy of Supreme King Clearwing. This is a card that you're going for using when going second. When you bait all your opponent's negates, you summon this, you clear their board, and you basically are free to play. We have 1 copy of Baroness. This is another card that can destroy your own cards. Believe it or not, this also has an effect that destroys the cards on the field, not just on your opponent's field, so you can use this card to destroy your own skills too, so you can get searches, and by summoning your Oath Dragon with your Tuning Magician, this card could not be easier to summon, so it's a really, really good card. I know it's expensive, but it's a card that just makes this deck so much better, but if you can't afford it, of course the deck is still playable without it, but it's a really good card nonetheless. And for the Link monsters, we have 1 copy of Needle Fiber. This card is just amazing with Tuning Magician. You basically get a free Link 4 because of Selene, and you also get another monster back from the graveyard that can be used for synchros with your Dragon Pit, your Astrograph, your Zangief. You can get an Omega, really great card. 1 Dagda, of course I mentioned, as long as we have Scythe, we're going to use it, so why not? 1 copy of Masquerena. This is the monster you summon when you know that you will not be able to get a lot of monsters on the field in order to be able to pop with your Tornado Dragon or maybe something like that, your Dagda, so you summon this to go for a Unicorn during your opponent's turn, which is still a decent play to do. 1 copy of Selene, absolute must in Pendulum decks. This just card brings back your Tuning Magician, giving you free access to Link 4. It's an amazing card. 1 copy of Unicorn because of Masquerena. And for the Link 4s, we have 1 copy of Access Code and 1 copy of Appaloosa. Tuning Magician makes these cards really easy to summon, and Access Code is just the monster that's going to destroy most of the going second games, and Appaloosa is a decent card to summon going first, especially if you're trying to play around Nibiru. I don't think it's worth trying to play around Nibiru, especially game 1 anymore, because with birds being hit so much, I don't think people are going to main it. Maybe they will side it, so game 2 and onwards, maybe it is worth summoning this card, but I wouldn't worry about it too much game 1. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Pendulum Magicians is just a really fun deck, and I hope that even though we're not going to get Electromite back 99%, I just hope that Konami just keeps bringing back more cards, like maybe more copies of Astrograph, or maybe giving us back a copy of the Fusion Starving Venom. Now that without Electromite and only 1 copy, it would be very difficult to FTK regardless, so we can only hope that we get more cards back, and who knows, maybe the deck is actually going to become a really good strategy again sometime that you're going to be able to see a lot of in tournaments. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.